Alrighty. What is going on YouTube? Welcome to another live chat, or at least another live session with me, EK. So today we're going to talk about a little something that's I guess has been a little bit more of a I'm not gonna say controversial, but like a little bit more discussed topic. I guess it became controversial, but one video I always want to talk about more is about the Asian American identity and how it feels to be how it feels to be an Asian American in America and growing up here. Um, I mean, mainly because like it all stemmed from a conversation that I had with one of my old coworkers back in 2017, I want to say. So one of my coworkers, basically just to set the story, like she is from Taiwan. And I was talking to her something about one day where I was like, "Oh, hey, I noticed that the team we're working on, the majority of us are Asians." And she was like, "Oh, I never really noticed." And at first I was like, "How could you not?" or whatever, right? Just jokingly. And she's like, "Well, like, to be honest, she wasn't saying this like in a way to be mean or anything, but she's like, well, honestly, like I don't see like me and my other coworkers, like, I don't see you guys as Asian. I think of you guys as American. Like to her, like, and what she wasn't saying that to like, deny us our Asian identity or anything or saying or anything derogatory. She from her perspective as an Asian from Asia, her definition of an Asian is someone from Asia, not born and raised in America. So to so from so us for to her perspective, we're American, which completely makes sense. I'm like, yeah, like it's kind of like, I mean, in reversal, it'd be like, yeah, I think of myself as in, like I would call someone from China, Chinese, not Chinese American or something, even if they're in America or something like that. Like that's just like kind of my definition, right? It's not something derogatory or anything like that. It's just how people perceive things. So I thought it was interesting when she said that, and I was like, at first, my first initial thought was like, what the hell, dude? Like, what's up with that? But then I really kind of thought about it, and we had like a pretty fun discussion at a happy hour later about essentially kind of our own definitions of what it means to be Asian, and also talked a lot about growing up in as an Asian American in America, or as an Asian in America, like what does that mean? Like what does it look like? What's different? What's the same? Things like that. Um, and just as I was about to make that video, I catch wind of another video that's gone viral of a someone on TikTok, basically in an Asian person from Asia who basically vented her frustrations about um, Asian Americans calling out, like, being white knights and being political police and, calling out like a cultural appropriation and stuff like that, right? Like, and she basically, with the some of her video, talked a lot about, like just appreciating Asian culture and that, like, if someone does X, it doesn't always mean the cultural appropriation. But the part that really kind of bugged me was when she talked about how Asian Americans aren't Asian, like we're American, and that we have somehow no right to talk about cultural appropriation because we're not from Asia. And that really kind of threw me for a loop because it's like I feel like she doesn't understand what Asian Americans go through, how we live and how we grow up in this country. Like, yes, like are we like we're not as in tune with our with Asian culture as well as a person that's living in Asia, obviously. Like, but it's not like when we were born here, like one, we didn't choose to be born here. Two, it's like it's not like when our parents moved here, especially like us who are second generation, when our parents moved here, it's not like they automatically adopted American culture. Like I always tell some of my friends, like, I if I'm like, yeah, I grew up in America, I grew up in California, but with all intents and purposes, within the confines of the four walls of my house, it was China in there. All right. Like my parents are from China. It was in there, it was China. Okay. Like I was raised by my grandparents who didn't speak a lick of English. So I was in ESL for like at least half um of my elementary school years because my first language was Chinese. I didn't there was no one to teach me English except for TV. My older brother, he didn't speak a lick of English the day he went into kindergarten. And throughout kindergarten and at least like, through the first few years of our both of our elementary school days, like we both had to take an ESL course, which is, English as a second language, because that's just we didn't have anyone teaching us English at the time. So and like, for all the meals that we ate within our house, it was all Chinese because again, my grandparents who were there to take care of us, like obviously they only know how to make one thing, and every day, and I'm pretty sure I learned chopsticks how to use them when I was like 2 years old. So it's like I still remember, the first time they gave it to me, and I was like, ah, why? Like I was like, give me back my fork and my spoon. Um, but from that point on, it was like that's just what we do. Um, and and I feel like and in a lot of ways, I think a lot of you know it seems like a lot of Asians in Asia, or at least that's the perspective I got from my coworker when we were chatting. Like they assume we just become American when we come here, and it's like that's not the case. Like yes, we consume American media. We go to American schools. It's not like we went to like a Chinese school like that was like all Chinese, or anything like that. But it's like we get kind of like we get two worlds to live in essentially, because when we go home, it's completely different. My parents, for all intensive purposes, like raised us in a Chinese home. They didn't like raise us in an quote unquote American home. Like, we didn't even celebrate Thanksgiving until like probably until we were adults. Like, we kind of did it when by the time like, me and my older brother grew up to like in the like during our high school years, but not really. Like we never had turkey. you know, we never that was never a thing because most of our parents and relatives don't even like turkey. They don't like the stuffing. They don't like any of that stuff. Now that we actually do, if we do get together for Thanksgiving or Christmas, it's always like a Chinese dinner, like a typical Chinese one, or we do like hot pot or something. It's not gonna be like turkey with all the fixings. Like that's just not a thing, that we ever did, ever. So I don't like this. And it's also like it kind of also I feel like that statement also completely disregards like all the first generation people who have come to this country. It's kind of like, oh, you left your country, so therefore you're no longer a part of us, like, and we don't care about you. It's kind of like, dude, they came here during like my parents came here during a time in China where it was like really bad. Like there was like a lockdown, people couldn't come in or out. I mean, and a lot of people were just starving. So it's like, how can you fault them for just trying to make it somewhere else? Because they knew, they can make like a few months' wages in like a couple of days in another country. It's like people do that all the time, and it's almost like they're punishing their children and not calling them non-Asians because something like some people could do like some like and like, a lot of people left the country because for whatever reason. So it's like I feel like that's just like kind of like a dick thing to say to some people. um but yeah, like for I feel like to say that like, oh, Asian Americans aren't Asian, it's like, dude, I bet you like one, I can tell you this, like I bet you anything that like we grew up a lot more Asian than we did grow up American. Like for the most part, like I can't say that for everybody, obviously, because there are a lot of third, fourth generation families here, and they obviously grow up quite differently compared to a second generation like me. But like for a lot of us, we keep a lot of our culture. Like the biggest holiday in the year for my family is obviously Chinese New Year. We don't or Lunar New Year, I should really say. We're not celebrating Christmas. Like those are just kind of nice to have. It's like, oh yeah, we get a time off, but like we don't get. But Chinese New Year is like something that's like, oh, you show up to every year. Like you don't show up to Christmas, whatever. Like who cares? Like no one really like makes a big deal about it. But it's like if you don't show up to Chinese New Year or Lunar New Year for that dinner, it's like someone's gonna smack you. Like not literally, but sometimes. But that those are like the things we cherish. We cherish like the Moon Festival. Like we like every like I mean, my parents are arguably aren't the most traditional people most of the time. Like my grandparents were a lot more about it, but like even so, like we were raised with a lot of Chinese values, with like filial piety, and um focusing on family and everything that like that's more normal in a Chinese family. And so I feel like for a lot of Asians, I should say, who may feel the same sentiment, that oh yeah, like American Asians aren't Asian. Like you should really you should really look into what our lives are like first, because like you know we're kind of battling. We now have like two, like Asian Americans now have like two sides of like two places where we feel like we're not accepted. Like in America, we're not seen as American. We're like no one will ever call us just American. We're always Asian American. And in Asia, we're not seen as Asian. So now we're not accepted in both our mother countries and in the place that where we grew up. It's like now, like where do we go? It's like now we're stuck between a rock and a hard place. And trust me, like I've like most throughout my life, like I wouldn't say it happens all the time, but like there's always a lot of times where people are like, hey, how long have you been in America? I'm like, I was born here. It's like, whoa, like that's so crazy. And it's like, why is that so crazy? Like Chinese and Asian people have been in this country for hundreds of years. So it's like, why do you like they just automatically assume I'm a foreigner, like we're the perpetual foreigner in this country. And I don't know if that's ever like when that's gonna end, but I still, on any given, like especially in the last, I would say, couple of years, it's been a lot more vocal to make Asian Americans, especially Chinese Americans, to feel like we don't belong here. So even though I was born here, I was born in Reno, Nevada, and I've been living and doing everything that like Americans do in the US, like for the last 35 years of my life. So, I feel like I'm as American as anybody else, as apple pie. But there are to a lot of people in this country who just see me as like, oh, he must be from another country. And now, our own mother countries are like, you're not really a part of us too. And I get it, like from a non like derogatory form. It's like, yes, I am not Asian. Like I my ability to speak Cantonese is conversational at best. I can barely read and write Chinese, and my main language is English, obviously. So it's like, but it doesn't mean that like I'm completely removed from what my family's legacy. Like, and sure, maybe in a few generations, or maybe in one or two generations, like there's a good chance that my family line will no longer speak Chinese, or maybe will. I don't know. Like, I mean, it really depends on like what they determine. But that I'm not going to go into that. But anyways, I really want to just kind of convey the message that like please don't disregard like what I grew up with and what things I know. Sure, I'm not obviously not as in tune with the Asian culture as a Asian person in Asia, but I'm not like completely, removed from it either. My um, it was just I mean, it's just I think it's just a little ridiculous for them to just completely disregard Asian Americans, especially when there's so many of us, I and it's not just Chinese Americans, but Korean Americans, Japanese Americans, Vietnamese Americans, Filipino Americans, whatever American, or any Asian American in this like those of us who are second generation and even third or fourth generation, you know, we don't like, yes, we have our own like a different identity and we grew up differently, but we're not that different from you. It's not night and day. It's not as different from like a British person, like a white British person. It is compared to say someone who grows up in Nigeria. You know, like there's not that uh, contrast is not that different. And for me, you know, for like I always felt like a little different for me. I mean, like I've never felt fully American and I've never felt fully Asian in a lot of ways. Though I do identify a lot more with my Asian side than I do with my American side. Um in the sense that like, you know, on a day-to-day basis I eat 99 probably like 80% Asian food. You know, I mean, yeah, sure I still like my burritos and like my burgers and stuff, but like yesterday I had Vietnamese and Chinese food. And today I'm probably gonna have Vietnamese food again, you know, just because of where I live. Um, so and then Friday for dinner again, like more Asian food. So uh yeah, I mean I think it's just I feel like people just um we, like I feel like that video that that girl put out made a lot more separation than there was unity. And in this time and age, especially Asian people in America need to unite, not separate. So, but that's just kind of my thoughts on it. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. You know, especially if you're Asian American, like, what do you guys think? Like, is she right? Is she wrong? Let's discuss it and let's have a civil discussion. Let's not go crazy at each other because, again, we need to unify, not divide. Uh, hey, that kind of rhymed. But, anyways, let me know what you guys think. Thank you guys for watching. Please have yourself a great day. Stay safe, stay clean, and hope to see you guys next time.